I told you. You'd die for that. You should have gone for the head.
It's been an hour now since the news dropped that Sony and Disney have parted ways in terms of collaborations between the two companies. So let's talk about it. Since it's only been an hour, there may be more information coming out tonight or tomorrow regarding the news article, but let's take the news as 100% fact. What happens next? Sony originally made a deal with Disney allowing Spider-Man to appear in 3 cameo films, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, and have 2 solo films, Homecoming and Far From Home. After Far From Home was released, the contract was over and was in need for a renewal. Originally, Marvel Studios earned 5% of the Raimi film's earnings, and once Disney bought Marvel Studios, eventually, in time, the Disney and Sony deal happened. The contract got more complicated though. Sony would produce, market, and have final say when it came to the solo Spider-Man films, while Marvel Studios would basically just make them, which then allowed Peter Parker to be a part of the MCU. Reportedly, this deal died once Disney asked for a 50-50 cut of the Spider-Man solo films' earnings, probably once they saw how much Far From Home made, and Sony denied it completely, and did not continue talks over that. I've seen people put blame on both companies, which is right. Disney got greedy, and probably shouldn't have asked for the 50-50 split. Disney already owns all of the money from merchandise sales, which in the grand scheme of things is a lot of money. Maybe a 15-75 split is more reasonable, but even then, that is pushing it. But also, Sony is to blame for just stepping away from the negotiation table after Disney offered their deal. It's called compromising. You negotiate. But Sony weren't having it. Now again, taking this deal as 100% truth, and Spider-Man is going back to Sony, what happens? What are the consequences of this deal being torn apart? Well, it's a lot worse than what was first expected.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
During the massive Sony email hacks of a couple years ago, multiple parts of the Disney-Sony deal were leaked. These weren't the final documents, however the leaks happened near the time of the deal, making these at least somewhat close to the actual documents. And in those documents, list tons of things that will make any MCU stan depressed. One of the reasons hardcore Spider-Man fans dislike the MCU Spider-Man is because, well, he isn't 100% accurate to his comic book self. Things like motivations, a lack of great power comes great responsibility, and a lack of looking out for the small guy, just to name a few. However, there are actually legal reasons for this. Marvel Studios are not allowed to use comic-accurate versions of the Spider-Man characters in their films. Hence, Iron Man Jr., young Aunt May, no Harry Osborn, and instead we have Ned, Vulture being a tech-based villain instead of real wings, and Mysterio being a genius who worked for Tony Stark and uses illusion tech instead of using real magic. And, of course, Mary Jane Watson. This time around, we have Michelle Jones. So once you know why this is the reason MCU Spider-Man feels so different compared to other Spider-Man counterparts, it makes total sense. However, this is the scary part. If Sony were ever to take Spider-Man away, all assets, which are characters, would be permanently frozen by Disney and Sony until they come to another agreement, or if Disney gets full rights of Spider-Man. Now that news of Sony taking Spider-Man away is a lot more depressing. This could mean no more new MJ, no more Ned, absolutely no reference to the MCU, no more young Aunt May. The only thing that stays the same is Tom Holland as Spider-Man and John Watts as the director. Both Holland and Watts are contracted for 2 more films, regardless if Marvel Studios makes them. This is pretty depressing news. However, while writing the script for the video, I just saw even more news come out regarding the deal. A Sony rep has contacted a news source saying the article was prematurely made and nothing is finalized regarding Spider-Man in the MCU. So take that as you will. But once that news dropped, Sony stock began to drop, and mass outrage with boycott Sony Spider-Man trending on Twitter, and literally every single comment on Sony's Instagram and Twitter being about how much they suck. I've already seen conspiracy theorists say Disney did this on purpose, so the mass outcry that Sony is taking Spider-Man away influences their decision in order to keep Spider-Man in the MCU. However, at the end of the day, Avi Arad will do anything possible to get his greedy hands back on Spider-Man 100% again. The man is obsessed with Spider-Man. He will do literally anything. He's not really a good person. So at the end of the day, this video was telling you what happens if Spider-Man goes back to Sony. Absolutely no reference to the MCU whatsoever, and the only thing returning is Spider-Man and John Watts. So could Sony take back Spider-Man? Yes. Would it work? Not really. It would have to be fully disconnected from the MCU. The only way I see this is a certain someone lives on the West Coast, and putting Peter Parker over there, where no MCU heroes live, would be a pretty good way of disconnecting Tom Holland from the MCU. So, you know, everyone get ready for a Spider-Man v Venom 2022. Yay.